Today, we're talking about a ship, the SS Great Eastern. It was this legendary vessel from the Victorian era, an absolute marvel of its time. But here's the thing, it was also seen as a spectacular failure. Or was it? That's what we're going to dig into.
Yeah, from the get-go, this is pretty much how everyone saw it. It wasn't a triumph, it was seen as, well, a monument to ambition that had just gone way, way too far. People called it cursed, you know? Like, right from the moment its keel was laid, it was this epic story of disaster that just totally captivated the public.
So how did it get this reputation? I mean, where does that cursed label even come from? Well, to really get a handle on the ship's incredible second act, you have to understand its disastrous first one. We need to look at the series of calamities that created this legend of a cursed giant.
Okay, just look at the sheer scale of this thing. We're talking about a ship designed by an absolute genius of the era, Isambard Kingdom Brunel. And it wasn't just a little bigger than other ships, no, it was a complete game changer, a quantum leap. We're talking over 200 meters long. It literally dwarfed everything else on the water. And the vision for it was just as huge, non-stop travel from Britain all the way to India, something no one had ever even tried before.
But with that massive scale came some massive problems. Right from the start, its launch was a complete disaster. It took multiple tries and nearly bankrupted the company. Then, during its sea trials, a boiler explodes, killing several crewmen. And, in a truly tragic twist, its creator, the great Brunel himself, suffers a stroke and dies right before his creation's maiden voyage. And as a passenger ship, forget about it. A total commercial nightmare. It was too big, way too expensive, and just seemed to be a magnet for accidents. The story was set in stone for the public. This ship was just plain cursed.
So, you've got this reputation for failure, for being a money pit. You'd think it's heading straight for the scrapyard, right? End of story. But what if its real purpose, its true calling, hadn't even been discovered yet?
Okay, so while the Great Eastern is floundering as a passenger liner, the rest of the world is wrestling with this new, monumental challenge. How do you connect continents? The biggest question of the day was, is it even possible to lay a telegraph cable across the entire, vast, incredibly deep Atlantic Ocean?
And this is where the story gets really interesting. This is the central paradox of the SS Great Eastern. All those things that made it a total failure as a passenger ship, they suddenly became its greatest strengths for this new mission. Think about it. Its ridiculous size, that meant unparalleled stability in the notoriously rough Atlantic. Its enormous hull, which was way too big for passengers, it was the only hull on the planet big enough to carry the thousands of kilometers of super heavy cable needed for the job in one go. And that double hull, which everyone thought was just overkill, that provided the survivability needed for dangerous deep-sea operations. It was perfect.
So, our failed passenger liner gets a second chance, a brand new mission. And we're not talking about some simple fix-it job. Oh no, this was a high-stakes engineering drama, a real nail-biter that would play out over 2 crucial voyages. These voyages would decide not just the ship's destiny, but the fate of global communication itself.
So, the first attempt, back in 1865, it looked like the curse was real. They get over 2/3 of the way across the Atlantic, and then the cable snaps. It's just lost. Gone in the deep ocean. A totally devastating failure. But here's the amazing part. They didn't give up. In 1866, they came back. And this time, they did it. They laid a perfect, unbroken cable all the way from Ireland to Newfoundland. But wait, it gets even better. In what has to be one of the most incredible feats of marine engineering ever, they sailed back to where the first cable broke, found it, fished it out of the deep ocean, and finished laying that one too. 2 working cables. In one summer. The curse? Absolutely shattered.
Now, to understand just how big a deal this was, you need to know what came before. Before this cable, the absolute fastest way to get a message from Europe to North America was by the fastest steamship. And that took, on a good run, about 10 days.
10 days. Now, after the Great Eastern's success, that time dropped from 10 days to a few minutes. Let that sink in. This wasn't just a small improvement. This was a total annihilation of time and distance as people knew it.
And the world changed, like overnight. The consequences were immediate and they were profound. Suddenly, the financial markets in London and New York were in sync. Diplomats could handle international crises in near real time instead of waiting weeks for a message to cross the ocean. Empires could govern their distant territories with incredible speed. And news could now flash across the Atlantic almost as it was happening. You see, the Great Eastern didn't just lay a cable, it laid the very foundation for the modern, globalized world we live in today.
So what's the big takeaway from this incredible story? I mean, what does it all mean? Well, the ship's journey teaches us something really powerful, not just about innovation, but about the very nature of failure itself. It shows us this kind of hidden logic, a way that a total disaster can morph into a world-changing success.
Because this project did way more than just connect point A to point B. It totally reconfigured our map of the world. Suddenly, these tiny, obscure little coastal towns in Ireland and Newfoundland, they became critical hubs in a brand new global network. And the deep ocean, which used to be this big, scary, unknowable void, it became a space that could be measured, mapped, and engineered. Oh, and those crazy techniques they had to invent to fish that broken cable out of the sea, that basically created the entire industry of deep-sea operations from scratch.
You know, there's actually a term for things like the Great Eastern. Historians call it a transitional artifact. And it's a fascinating idea. It's basically a piece of tech that's kind of stuck between two eras, a bridge from an old experimental way of doing things to a new, more stable future. It was just too out there for its original job, but it turned out to be the perfect tool for a problem its designers never even saw coming. Its real value was only unlocked through that adaptive reuse.
So, what about the ship itself? What was its final fate? Well, kind of ironically, after its greatest triumph, it became obsolete. Again. Its unique advantages weren't needed anymore because engineers started designing smaller, more efficient, purpose-built ships to lay cables. So the Great Eastern, the giant that changed the world, ended its days as a floating advertisement and was quietly scrapped in 1889.
But really, its physical end doesn't matter. That's not the point. The real story, the true legacy, is how this whole thing forces us to rethink what failure even means. All those disasters, the bungled launch, the deadly explosion, the snapped cable, they weren't just dead ends. They were steps in a process. Every single failure was a lesson, providing crucial knowledge that, in the end, made that incredible success possible.
And that success? It's a legacy we are all living with right now as you watch this. The entire system that the Great Eastern kicked off, this radical idea of literally wiring the continents together for instant communication, that is the direct, linear ancestor of the fiber optic networks snaking across the ocean floors today. The very networks that power our internet, our phones, our entire digital world.
So it all leaves us with a really fascinating question, doesn't it? The Great Eastern was written off as a colossal, embarrassing failure, but it turned out to be the one and only tool that could build the future. So it really makes you wonder, what are the failures of today? What are the big, ambitious, seemingly disastrous projects that we're all looking at and shaking our heads that might just be quietly waiting for the right problem to come along so they can build the world of tomorrow?